People who have stories they want to share, but have not found a question relevant to them. What are your stories?
I don't know who remembers, but after 9/11 there was a celebrity fundraiser, and if you donated more than $100 you got to talk to a random celebrity. We could barely afford it at the time, but donated the $100 and they put Whoopi Goldberg on the line. She thanked us, said a few things. We mostly just smiled, and at the end she was wrapping it up and I said, "You are awesome" as center square, and she laughed. One of my friends to this day periodically reminds me that I once made Whoopi Goldberg laugh, smiley face.
I live in Maine. My brother is a hobbyist photographer, a really good one, in my opinion. So one Christmas he gave my girlfriend and I some nice prints of some photos he took of us. He threw in a few scratch tickets to fill out the gift bag. Lucky for us, we won $30,000 in one of the scratch tickets. We used most of it to pay off the interest on our student loans, but used the rest for a vacation to Ireland, a place my girlfriend and I always wanted to visit. It was amazing. Flash forward a few years, my brother, who lives in DC, has a new girlfriend. She spent a year studying abroad in Ireland back in college, so we chatted a bit about how much we both loved the country. The conversation moved on to something else, as conversations tend to do. However, someone pipes in later, "Hey Parker, did you know that brothers Giffel spent a year in Ireland?" "Oh yeah, we talked about that earlier, so cool." Now back on the subject of Ireland, we start discussing some of more obscure things we did on the trip. I bring up this stand-up comedy show we found one night, in the basement of some pub. Really small space, probably 20 people in the audience at most. Brother's girlfriend says that she had been to show there once, too. I start remembering some traits of the comedians. One was black Scottish dude, another was a young woman with the side of her head shaved, the MC was even funnier than the main acts. Her jaw drops, she remembers those same comedians, too. I'm thinking that it's way too much of a coincidence, so I look up the old event schedules to see if those same acts performed on multiple dates. Nope, only once. What a crazy coincidence. My girlfriend and I were at the same 20-person basement comedy show as my brother's future girlfriend, in completely different country, on a trip that was funded by a scratch ticket from said brother. Pretty neat.
I realize this post already has over 1,200 comments, but writing things down feels good sometimes. When I was in college, I was dating a guy who lived in an off-campus apartment. One night when he was walking me down to the lobby to head home, there was a woman on the floor just outside the elevator. I remember she was wearing a skirt and her blouse was backwards. She was looking in her purse for her keys. We initially stepped around her to leave because we live in a city with a lot of college students, so drunk folks on the ground aren't uncommon. But something felt wrong. I turned around and went back to her and asked if she needed help. She was slurring really bad, talking about how she lived here and she needed her keys. I offered to help her get to her apartment and was eventually able to prop her up, get her in the elevator and then down the hallway to the door number she kept repeating. I asked if she had roommates or a boyfriend and she just kept saying, "He's in there." So I knocked but no answer. I knocked super loud again but no answer. Woman is now back on the floor and actually drooling, spitting like drunk folks do when they might throw up or have already thrown up. So she's exactly zero help. I end up going through her purse to try to find information or keys or something because she hasn't even been able to tell me her name at this point. On top of her stuff in her purse is her underwear, balled up. I pushed it to the side and kept digging where I found the woman's work badge with her keys attached. I put the keys in the door to open it, but it doesn't work. She tells me over and over that those are the keys and they work, despite my showing her that they don't. I knock another time but no answer. I go back into her purse to find a phone or something and there is mail in there with her name on it, but a completely different address in a different borough of the city. My stomach drops. This woman is heavily intoxicated. Her blouse is on backwards. Her underwear is in her purse. She's been insisting that she came out of this apartment where her boyfriend lives, but nobody is answering and she lives on the other side of town. Eventually, after probably 45 minutes, I am able to get the woman to unlock her phone. Obviously I don't know who any of the people in her contacts are, so I just call the one labeled Mom. After a few tries, Mom answers, clearly having been asleep. I explain that I am a stranger but I have her daughter with me and I'm trying to get her home. Mom confirms the address on the envelopes is where she lives. We talk for a couple minutes and I give her my number. Next I focus on getting a cab and bringing her home. I eventually get her inside, put her in bed, phone on the charger and a couple bottles of water next to it in a trash bin. I send a text to her mom to let her know she's home and in bed, then I leave. The next day, I'm on the bus between classes when mom calls me. She thanks me for helping her daughter last night and they wanted to let me know what happened. The woman went on a date with a guy she met on an app. They went and had 2 drinks at a restaurant, but the woman became insanely drunk very fast. It turns out that when she went to the restroom, he had DGED her drink when it came to the table. He took her back to his apartment and assaulted her, then dumped her in the lobby where I found her. The door we were pounding on was the rapist's door. The woman didn't remember hardly anything the next day after the drink, but she was sore and smelled latex when she went to the bathroom. If I had taken her to the hospital instead of just taking her home, she could have received treatment faster and had a report written. That day I wrote down in a Word document everything I remembered from the night before in excruciating detail. I told mom that I did this and was willing to testify or talk to police or do anything needed of me. She said she would tell her daughter, but she just wants to move on. I texted mom a few months later to ask how her daughter is doing and to remind her I'm still able to provide a statement or anything else. That's the last time I talked to her. That was years ago, but whenever I get a new computer, I make sure to transfer that Word document to a safe place on it, just in case they ever came back and needed it.
I was at the zoo one time when I was younger, camp trip, and I stopped by the gorilla enclosure. The gorillas, being gorillas, were ambling all over the place and hooting like crazy. But for some odd reason, when they saw my face, they were enchanted. I had 4 to 5 gorillas just staring at me, and lounging around. They didn't seem territorial or anything. I ended up playing a game of peekaboo with one of them, and unfortunately never got to see any of the other enclosures. It's a fond memory, that's for sure. Addendum. Chimps did the same thing to me as I was walking out of the zoo. Like, what did they want with me? What did they see in me? I'm not sure, and I don't think we'll ever know.
Apparently some primates like certain people because they have a similar hair color to their species and see them as similar to themselves. Edit. Okay, so to explain myself, I heard this on a podcast with Brian Cox with Jane Goodall as a guest on the Infinite Monkey Cage podcast. Promise I'm not just calling up a primate, haha.
When I was maybe 13 or so, I was standing by this big glass window into a polar bear tank with my hands up in a Y above my head. One of them swam down and put its paws where my hands were, and I'm pretty sure I cried VC. It was heckin' cute. It even stayed there for a little bit, just vibing with me. I haven't thought of that story in years, so thank you, Starstruck.
The story of how my mother reunited with her sister. My mother was born in the very far east of Russia. Her father was a survivor of the gulags and she was raised in a small settlement that was mainly populated by ex-prisoners and their families. Before my grandfather married, he had survived a mine collapse and while in recovery had an affair with a nurse that produced a child. After being released and settling down with my grandmother, he had reached out and established contact with his daughter. They met a few times and he even took my mother on a few occasions to meet her. She lived in a city 5,000 kilometers to the south. But eventually, once the government let them move, my mother's family moved across the country, and this being the times before cell phones and social media, they lost touch with my aunt. The last time my mother saw her, she was about 12 and my aunt was about 20. Fast forward about 17 years later, my mother is on the Moscow metro, taking my sister to music school. She sees a woman sitting across from her and as she describes it, just felt a gravitational pull towards her. She begins staring at her, trying to figure out why it feels like she knows this person. Suddenly, it clicks, and as the train pulls into my mother's stop, she gets up and grabs this woman and says, "Are you another Rusky pianist's aunt, daughter of his grandfather? Get off the train with me now." And lo and behold, her intuition was right. And that's how after about 17 years of no contact, my mother just happened to reunite with her long-lost sister on a crowded Moscow metro train.
My mum had a similar experience. Her family is from Morocco and lived there until the mid-1940s. Back then Grandma had already had about 8 kids and she would routinely nurse other children, neighbors and relatives. Apparently it was sorta common back then. And #X200B. Anyways, they had to flee to Israel at some point in the 40s, shortly after the country was established. Skip forward many years, my mum grew up, married my dad, had me and my siblings and eventually moved our family down to Australia. All the way on the other side of the world in a random city my dad had selected. They are walking down the street one day when a random man stops my mum in the street. He says to her in Arabic, which she understands but not quite well, "Excuse me, are you the daughter of Biba 420's grandmother?" My mother looks at the guy and says, "Yes, I am Baba's mother, her youngest child." The stranger gives her a massive bear hug and starts crying. He says, "You are like my sister. Your mother used to feed me when I was a baby and I grew up with your older siblings, and that is how she met the man I grew up calling Uncle Max."
My stepsister has a lot of mental and health issues. Severely autistic, and a lot of people assume she just can't function. My stepmother, neither of our mothers, another wife, was horribly abusive when we were kids, and much more so to my sister because she couldn't vocalize it. There was a point right after my grandparents got custody that my sister enough and just walked downstairs, stared our stepmother in the eye and pissed everywhere before walking back upstairs. She knows exactly what she did, and it was the funniest poo because the stepmother had to clean it. To this day she acts like my sister was a horrible person who just didn't like her, and every time she tells the story I laugh my ass off because my sister dealt with so much poo and that was her best. Fu.
Wife was on her first Zoom meeting last March in the kitchen. I asked if I could be off screen cooking breakfast quietly, and she said yes, as long as I'm quiet and not distracting. I wound up burning what I was cooking, causing lots of smoke. Then when I was trying my best to get the situation under control, my robe that I was wearing laid on the burner, electric stove, and started smoking. So basically my wife told me to not be distracting, and I wound up lighting myself on fire. To her credit, she maintained poise and completely ignored my situation. We still laugh about it a year later.
I can just see your wife on the Zoom call and you flailing around in the background trying to put the fire out. Tears of joy, tears of joy, tears of joy.
Haha. I kept looking over at her and could tell that she was thinking, "Yup, this is my husband."
I have never seen a question that would let me tell this story. I was a production assistant on a stop-motion kids show. A big part of my job was going out to purchase supplies the workshop needed to build the sets and puppets, etc. Now the thing about these kind of workshops is they will use whatever works, and they often come up with unorthodox solutions as shortcuts, like the time they sent me to a sex shop at 9:30 a.m. to buy thumb cuffs. Our cop puppet needed handcuffs and they were the perfect size. But that didn't even compare to my most amusing, embarrassing supply run ever. The animation director came up to me one afternoon saying that he needed me to go to the DGTORE to buy, and I quote, "the largest tube of KY jelly you can find." In stop motion, KY is used to simulate water, especially when it has to interact with the puppets. It stays put between frames and doesn't damage the paint. Anyway, our seamstress overheard our discussion and asked me while I was at the DGTORE to get every tube of wet wipes they had. Safe way to clean the puppets and wardrobe, and we went through a lot of them. Next, the woman in charge of making all the limbs pipes up and asks me to get 6 pairs of white nylons while I'm at it. They hold the magnets in the feet. So this was my shopping list. 1 extra large tube of KY jelly. 6 pairs of white nylons. And every tube of wet wipes in the store. The look on the cashier's face when I dumped my basket out on the counter was priceless. And for me, fairly embarrassing.
My friend was an intern on Saturday Night Live. There was a short-lived trend back in the day to make clear products that were supposedly more healthy, clear, Crystal Pepsi being one of the more famous. He showed up at work and was told his only priority for the day was to buy as much Caro syrup as he could find. So, he spent the next 9 to 10 hours going to every bodega he could find, asking for all the Caro syrup they had, throwing it in a taxi and then returning to the studio when it was full, only to head out again. He said he bought out every store in the phone book, and they still ran out and had to scrp syrup off the drop cloths to finish the spot. https://youtube.be/gosjrg34$.
Brilliant. I'm especially loving the mental image of a cop puppet with tiny handcuffs.
The story on getting those was a good one too. They sent me out to the sex shop first thing in the morning. So when I got there I had to wait 10 minutes outside the store for it to open. I hung out for a few minutes before I realized the optics of being a single man waiting for a sex shop to open and went to find a Starbucks. The first shop didn't have any, so I had to hit 4 others on my quest. Fortunately, it wasn't a great neighborhood, so I had options. Sex shops at 10 a.m. are weird. I actually saw a guy in the stereotypical brown trench coat.
I was in the middle of a contract once with a guy when blood started pouring out of his ear. He ran straight out the door without a word and I was all kinds of worried for him. I'm so glad he turned back up later that week and explained he'd just had surgery on that ear. I sometimes wonder how I would have felt if he never came back. I kept fearing what sort of condition could cause that sort of thing to happen out of the blue.
I had tubes put in my ears when I was very little, once when I was 4 and once when I was 7. A couple years after the first set, maybe I was 6, I was playing with my neighbors and all of a sudden my left ear started gushing blood. It was a lot of blood. But it didn't hurt. Just effing terrifying for a 6-year-old to see that much blood coming out of their ear.
My great-grandmother lived in a nursing home for the last years of her life. She was about 95, with minimal eyesight and hearing when this happened. My great-grandmother told my mother she was afraid of that lady in black. "What woman in black?" my mother would ask. "The one that is standing at my bed every night. I think she is finally coming to get me." Naturally, my mother dismissed this as a figment of her granny's imagination. One evening, when my mother was visiting, GGM told her, "I think I am going to die tonight. Can you stay? I don't want to be alone when the lady in black comes for me." So my mother stayed at her bed, sleeping uncomfortably in an old armchair. Suddenly, she awoke to some noise she could not immediately pinpoint, but she saw a figure in a long, black gown, standing at the far end of the bed. My mother's scream must have woken the whole nursing home, but it especially scared the lady in black. She turned tail, left the room and ran into one of the nurses, who came running to investigate my mother's scream. It turned out, the lady in black was my GGM's bedridden and demented neighbor. Nobody knew she could actually walk, let alone dress up in her favorite black dress and wander the nursing home at night. Apparently, she was seen by some of the other inhabitants, who, fearing they would thought to be crazy, simply never talked about the ghost that would enter their rooms at night to stand at their beds and water their plants.
That is both scary and pretty hilarious.
That is so much more terrifying than what I thought was going to happen. I thought GGM was having a premonitory dream or hallucination and that she was going to inexplicably die that night she predicted she would. Nope. Crazy patient that happens to love the color black standing at, not one, but multiple patients' bedsides.
LMAO, watering their plants.
My family pet growing up was named Arwen, and she was a massive Airedale Terrier. She was the light of our lives, truly the world's best dog. She would herd the chickens and let the baby chicks nestle into her fur and nap on her as she sat quietly in the sunshine, not moving lest the peeps be disturbed. But her most heroic act came when my brother Liam, about 10 at the time, was trying to move our basketball hoop and base out into the yard for the summer. He didn't notice the 2 rattlesnakes coiled up under the base. But Arwen did. She leapt in front of Liam, between him and the snakes, and both Liam and my dad, who was nearby, saw both snakes strike. Dad ran and grabbed Liam, pulled him away, pulled Arwen aside with the other hand, then sent Liam running to grab the hatchet to dispatch the snakes. We took Arwen inside and put her on her bed, and we called the vet. The vet said he would come out to put the dog down, but if she was bitten by 2 snakes, there was basically no chance she'd live. But my mum said no way in hell was she putting her baby down without a fight. So she did some googling, and found out that just loading the poor dog with Benadryl can counteract snake venom. And that's just what she did. Arwen lay still, swollen and bleeding, for 3 days. But then she got up. And she walked around. And she lived 5 more years, dying at 17. She was the best dog.
PSA: there is now anti-venom for dogs' pets. Also, there is an awesome group on FB, National Snakebite Support, that will put you in touch with experts, doctors, veterinarians, depending on who was bitten, to help you get the best treatment. Just in case anyone reading this ever needs it.
I'm crying with thankfulness that sweet Arwen did everything she could to protect her boy, and that your mother refused to take death as the payment for her work. She really was the best dog.
Back in high school I worked as kennel help at a veterinarian office. One day we ran out of sink cleaner and some various products necessary for work. He sent me to Walmart to stock us up. I loaded about 10 or 15 cans of Comet and a few jugs of Clorox in the buggy and was headed over to get something on the other side of the store. As I rounded a corner I almost collided with another lady's buggy. She looked down and all but screamed, "Is there a sale on Comet? Oh my God," and took off running with her buggy towards the cleaning aisle. I tried very hard to catch her and tell her it was for work. But she was absolutely determined to grab the rest of the Comet. If you were accidentally scammed by a teenager into buying a ton of Comet in 1984 or so, please know I tried to stop you.
I hope someday I see the post about how I was scammed into buying a ton of Comet in 1984 by a teenager in Walmart.
Comet is literally 99 cents. She wanted a sale.
What part of the US are you from? I've never heard of shopping carts referred to as buggy. I'm from the Northeast. Just curious. Edit. Wow, lots of people sure do want to tell me this is a Southern thing. Curiosity pacified, thanks all. Edit 2. Many responses confirming they are called trolleys in the UK. Roger that.
Waiting for my takeout at a Chinese restaurant when this middle-aged man stormed in complaining that he'd been waiting 30 minutes outside for them to bring him his spaghetti. The bar staff tried to explain that he might have been looking for the Italian restaurant next door, but he wasn't having any at that. Screaming commences for 5 minutes, climaxing with this brilliant line, "What the hell do you know? I have a master's degree." Shortly after that his wife calls asking where the hell he is and he starts blaming the staff. She starts yelling at him and he gets all sheepish, then slinks out the door to the Italian restaurant next door. Hilarious to witness, but I felt sorry for the waitstaff, so I left a 40% tip. Inside joke in the family now to say, I have a master's degree, when things start getting heated. Normally calms things down pretty quickly.
I adore stories like this for the sake of quotable phrases. I'm the same way when it comes to loudmouths at places I regular though. Big tips.
When I was maybe 12 or 13 years old, I was out camping in my backyard and was watching the stars, hoping to see a meteor or two. Out of the corner of my eye I see a satellite moving across the sky, traveling right to left. Out of the corner of my other eye I see another satellite appear, moving from the horizon, up. I see the speed they are both traveling and realize that if they keep moving at their current speed and trajectory, at least to my eye, they're going to hit each other. I keep watching them get closer and closer together until finally they are about to cross paths. They intersect each other and suddenly there's a quick bright flash, and then neither of them are there anymore. I've often thought about what I saw. I know the odds that I watch two satellites collide and obliterate each other are basically zero, but I can't think of any other explanation for what I saw that night. And #X200B. Edit. Wow, this blew up. Thanks to you, Xerxes, I may be getting closer to an answer. The timelines work out for it to have potentially been the August 1996 collision between the French Cerise https://en.wikipedia.org/wiki/Cerise_satellite military reconnaissance satellite and debris from an Ariane https://en.wikipedia.org/wiki/Ariane_family_family rocket. But I would need to know where the collision happened in relation to the ground. If it was over the northeastern US, we may have a winner. I'm having a hard time believing that a piece of space junk would be reflective enough to appear in the night sky as a satellite, but this is closer than I've ever gotten to having an answer, so I'm running with it until someone finds me a better answer. Edit. You, Xerxes, took a deeper dive and it looks like the geolocation doesn't match up. Crash happened over the Indian Ocean and I was in New England at the time. Oh well, the search continues.
While it could be two satellites colliding, it might be possible that it was the military practicing to intercept missiles, or satellites. So one satellite you saw was a target and the other satellite was a missile shot at it.
Were you in one of these spots? https://en.wikipedia.org/wiki/satellite_collision #artificial-satellite_collisions.
If you can remember when and where you were, you might actually be able to figure out if it did happen. They keep records of this sort of thing. Edit. This is the post that blows up.
Pulled a stranger's dildo out of my pocket at the pub. Went to buy a new jacket at Target, tried on the one on the rack but it was one size too small. Went back to the rack, grabbed the next size up and went straight to the counter and paid for it. Cashier throws it in the bag, I head home and throw the bag on the table. Next night my mates turn up at my house unannounced to grab me to go to the pub. I get dressed real quick, grab the bag with the jacket and jump in the car and head off to knock the top off a couple of frothies. A few shandies later and we decide to head home, get outside and it's definitely jacket weather. I throw the jacket on, the boys give me a hard time about how fancy it is, I put my hands in the pocket and find an object in there. No idea what it is or how it got in there, I pull it out in front of everybody. I'm left standing there, in my fancy new jacket, out the front of the pub with the lads, with a stranger's dildo in my hand and no idea how it got there. Of course nobody believed that I had no idea how that thing came to be in my possession. Almost 20 years later and I am still curious about the series of events that lead up to somebody needing to hide their dildo in a jacket on the rack at Target, why they didn't return to get it, and if they did return, what their reaction was when they couldn't find the jacket.
Maybe Voldemort realized using important items in hidden places was too easy for Harry and the gang to figure out, so went in totally the other direction for his second round of Horcruxes. Edit. Dark Magic would be such a great name for a vibrator. Edit 2. Or asterisk the Dark Lord, Soul Splitter Edition asterisk.
One of my favorite stories to tell. Pure shenanigans. So when I was a teenager I was in an iconic trio of friendship with Patrick and Pinky. Once we got older though we all moved around and we would hang out in pairs, but it was hard to coordinate us all hanging out at the same time. About 5 years ago we were all finally free just after Christmas and decided to meet up at our favorite spot, Denny's. Patrick had been dating this girl who is awful and I did not like her. She was mean, they fought a lot, it was a very toxic relationship. However, Pinky had made a painting of Patrick and her as a Christmas present and brought it with her to the restaurant. We also had a video camera going, so this is all on tape. We were just filming us being silly and stuff. Patrick ended up dropping the news that their girlfriend was trying to get pregnant. My reaction, on tape, is "Why? Lol." We then proceeded to have a deep friend talk with them about how that's a terrible idea, and they opened up about how they were really feeling about it and how things were in the relationship, and we were basically trying to convince him to break up with her. But then we had this effing painting, so what are we gonna do with it? Awkward. Lol. So me and Pinky went into the women's restroom and on the wall there was nothing but a nail. We hung the painting up and it fit perfectly. Even the colors coordinated with the style of the bathroom. It was perfect and the funniest thing ever. We left it there for years and would each go back and visit it whenever one of us was in town. Apparently a while back though that Denny's closed down, but luckily the painting was saved and it now lives at Patrick's brother's house.
Man. A picture really does say 1,000 words. That was such an unexpected story.
Well, did they have a kid, or what?
Yeah they did. Awesome kid. Relationship got even more terrible and then abusive AF. Luckily they have been broken up for a few years now and are finally in an okay space and can communicate and stuff now without a blow up, but it was really effing rough for a minute there. I ended up in the middle of all of it trying to support my best friend. So much drama, it a long story. But yeah, kid happened, things are okay now.
When I was a child I thought the term, bust a nut, was the same as, break a sweat, or to heavily exert yourself. I remember one day telling my older sister I had busted a nut, after cleaning the house, and the look of pure confusion and concern on her face. I didn't find out until years later what that actually meant. I'm a female by the way. Edit. Thanks for the awards y'all. I'm glad I could make you all laugh, smiley face. I mentioned this story years later to my older sister and she has no recollection of it, but the memory has always stayed with me.
I once gave the singer Meat Loaf 2 very awkward handshakes. This was obviously a few years back, when both conventions and handshakes were a thing. Meat Loaf arrived at his booth, and the first thing he did was go down his line to personally shake hands with everyone there. Unexpectedly, Meat Loaf was offering handshakes with his left hand, and me being a righty, when it came time for me to shake his hand my brain had a meltdown of what to do, so instead of also using my left hand to shake his hand, I extended both hands and awkwardly cupped his. I knew I messed up, so I didn't commit to the awkward hand cupping, so on top of it being awkward it was also loose, and if there's one thing that makes handshakes worse, it's when they're weirdly limp. He then went to his booth, began signing autographs, and eventually I made my way to the front. I got my autograph, and once again he offered his left hand to shake. This second handshake was slightly better than my first, in that this time I only extended one hand, my right, which I then noticed and went, oh, and then finally successfully offered my left hand. He shook it, and I went on my merry way with my autograph and a new story to tell. Very nice man, was very friendly to his fans and never once brought up my inability to give a proper handshake to a left hand.
I would blame Meatloaf. Who the hell offers a left-handed handshake? Edit. Till Meatloaf has a clawed right hand. That explains it. I take it back. Sad face. In a busy revolving door downtown, a guy stopped mid-cycle to pick up something on the floor. As he bent over, the glass partition in the revolving door immediately behind him whacked him hard in the butt. The guy made a big scene, yelling at the person behind him that he did it on purpose, and that he was going to call his lawyer.
He got a big ol' slap on the bum for free. He should be happy.
Good ones are designed to not do that. They have sensors that make it stop before it hits anyone. Edit. It has come to my attention that I'd forgotten that not all revolving doors are automatic like the one in my building.
I've shared this before, but my friend from grad school had previously been a skydiving instructor in Colorado, and had jumped more than 600 times. One of these times, he, for some reason, had his wallet in his suit, and it fell out. Fell to earth somewhere. He figured, this sucks but oh well. Absolutely no chance of finding it. Separately, a man in rural Colorado was found murdered. Turns out in their remote cabin where he lived with his daughter, he had been sexually abusing her and she finally had enough and killed him. The police searched the house and all of his property, and found my friend's wallet in the trunk of his car. Police thought to themselves, F***ing idiot murderer left his wallet in this dude's trunk, damn easiest arrest ever. Friend had the super believable alibi of, couldn't have been me officer. Actually that wallet fell out of my pants while I was skydiving. Edit to add. My friend was never arrested but he was questioned, and had to have his story corroborated. From what I remember of him telling me the aftermath, the cops knew early on that it was the daughter so she might have confessed. That's pure speculation though. The sexual abuse, self-defense detail didn't come out until later though. When the cops cleared my friend they told him the father had taken all of his cash. They have no idea why he kept the wallet.
This is only very darkly humorous, but my brother was murdered in 2000 and the killers were found because one left his wallet at the scene and the other left his cell phone. Not a difficult investigation. They did bust the wallet lever with SWAT once and then pursued him to Mexico where Mexican SWAT got him. So I like to think my brother would have been amused by that.
The absolutely insane odds of it landing in the worst possible place imaginable.
That's insane. LMFAO. I can imagine the cops. Are you Patrick Star? Yes. And this is your ID? Yes. Then this your wallet? Yes. So you killed the guy? Nope.
Back in early 2018 when I first moved to Utah to start school, I was at a 7-Eleven when there was this girl, and she was asking for directions to the train station. I pointed her in the right direction, but she was walking. I figured F it, I have an hour until class, so I'll give her a ride. She tells me about studying, volunteering, can't remember which, in Puerto Rico, Costa Rica, or some other Spanish country for months. She says she came out here to explore the area and that she moved in with an old high school friend, but he ended up being crazy and flipped out on her. She had to pretty much jump out of his truck because he wouldn't pull over. She was planning on just taking a bus out but she left her wallet in his place. I tell let's go grab it real quick but he ended up following us there and I flipped a quick U-turn out of there. Ended up completely just leaving everything there because I figured this dude might shoot us. I let her use my charger so she can get in contact with her parents to give her enough money to buy a ticket home, and sent her on her way. I had to get to class so I kinda left in a hurry once I dropped her off at the station and didn't get her info so she could let me know she made it home safe. I never got her name, but I know she was going somewhere in the Midwest. So if this story sounds familiar, and you remember a buff-bearded Mexican dude in a white Volkswagen hatchback helping Yar out, let me know that you're okay. It's been on my mind forever because I never knew what happened after I left. Okay, I get it. Puerto Rico is a part of the US.
Bro really just did a side quest LMAO.
Now I'm searching this thread looking for a girl explaining this from her side lol.
Link it to me if you find it tears of joy.
I hope she has a Reddit account, sees this and tells you she's fine.
I hope so too. It's been like 3 years and I still don't know. I just know the dude she was staying with was really unstable and I hope that she was okay.
One time I had a substitute teacher who fell and hurt herself while walking me somewhere. She went to the nurse, didn't tell any of the other teachers, they asked me during lunch where she was, and disappeared forever. I'm assuming she may have been let go for not telling anyone that she couldn't teach for the remainder of the day. It's basically a fever dream memory at this point cause it happened when I was 7. I hope she's okay now.
Reminds me of a substitute I had who was like 90. The fire alarm went off and we all got up to leave. He asked where we were going as he didn't hear the fire alarm.
One time I was walking across campus stone. I'm walking by two kids, aged maybe 10 and 5, like 20 meters away. Not sure why they were there without an adult, but they were. The younger one looks at me and yells, "Hey, I like your shirt." So I yell, Thanks." He responds, "And your backpack is okay." I don't respond. The older one yells, he's working on his compliments. We both continue on our ways. A few hundred meters away, a dude about my age walks up with a tray of cookies, says, "Hey, you want a cookie?" I'm like, "Yay, I'd love a cookie." "What's the cookie for?" He says, "No reason, just handing out cookies." "You want two?" I say, "Yay, I'd love 2 cookies." "Thanks a lot, bud." So I take 2 cookies and they were awesome. It was a pretty good walk.
Similar story. Was walking down the street a few summers ago and passed a bunch of shirtless gym bros chilling in their front yard with a grill and a cooler. They had this mountain of little foil-wrapped bundles all piled up next to the grill. As I was walking by, on the other side of the street, one of the guys yells, "Hey bro, want a hot dog?" I said sure, so the dude threw me one of those foil-wrapped things in a perfect spiral. Straight up fell into my outstretched hands in mid-stride from the opposite side of the road. Guy didn't even stand up out of his lawn chair. I aspire to be as cool as that dude.
This reminds me of a story from when I was in college. One weekend my friends and I all decided to take some shrooms and watch Ferngully in their apartment. It was amazing until the sludge monster came on, who really killed the vibe, so we all decided to turn off the movie and go walk around outside during the beautiful California day. We turn the corner to walk down the street, when we see an elephant in the street. No kidding, we all thought we were just tripping balls for a while, but it turned out that a frat was having their annual Sigma Zoo, where they brought animals out from the LA Zoo. I just stood there watching the wrinkles on the elephant, they are such majestic creatures. After that we walked to the main part of campus where they had bouncy castle obstacle courses, and we all took a turn, bouncing around. It was so fun.
I haven't told this story in a while, but Uber Eats scammed me out of $2K plus and ruined my 20th birthday LMAO. It was pretty much my first birthday where I was on my own and didn't celebrate with my family at all, since I was a 5-hour drive away at college. It also fell on a Tuesday, so I wasn't able to do anything with friends either. The plan was to grab dinner at an Indian place that Friday to celebrate. I got out of class early, and my only celebration was to order some IHOP through the Uber Eats app. It was like my 3rd time using it. Anyway, I got some chicken tenders for $16, then took a 5-hour nap. Real exciting. I woke up at around 8 p.m., after all the food places on campus closed. So I figured, F it, it's my birthday. Let's order out twice. So I tried to get some chicken nugs from McDonald's delivered. I press confirm order, the page loads, and I get an error. Okay, strange, let's try again. Another error, one more. I Google the error code, and see that it pops up whenever a card gets declined. That can't be right. The meal costs like $13, and at this time, I have about $1,000 on my bank account. For anyone who has a student wallet through PNC, you know that it's basically 3 accounts in one. You have a checking account and 2 savings accounts that are all linked to each other. As a broke college student, this was quite literally all I had to survive on. So I checked my bank. Every account was cleared out. $0 across the board. I had over 30 different pending transactions, all from Uber Eats. They ranged from 0.99 cents to $104, going until every account was emptied. I was sitting at about -$600 by the time I checked. So obviously, I'm freaking TF out. My bank was closed, so I couldn't call them. I hit the Uber Eats customer service. They asked me to list every transaction, which I do. They confirm the transactions came from them. Then, the agent tells me that these are just temporary holds, that they always do, and the money won't actually leave my account. Okay, but over 30 transactions. I spend hours trying to figure out what exactly went wrong in their system, and each agent keeps giving me the same copy and pasted response. The charges won't post to your account, just wait. The thing is, with debit cards, they treat pending transactions as if the money is already off your card, so I couldn't use my money at all. I was helpless. The next morning, I called my bank as soon as they opened. My card was cancelled, and they had to dispute each charge. There was so many of them that they couldn't all fit under one report, and had to be split into 3. Usually when you dispute a transaction, the bank gives you a provisional credit, which is a temporary refund of your money. they could only provisionally refund me on one case report, which still left me at about minus $150. I would have to wait the 2 months until the investigation ended until I would get the rest of my money back. Oh, and guess what? The money did leave my account. Not only that, but I was hit for approximately 10 overdraft fees for $35 each for all the ones that bounced. And when I went back to Uber Eats about this, they kept repeating the same message that the transactions wouldn't post. They already posted. That entire week was a mess. I was stranded at college with literally no money. My family struggles enough, and my mom had to skip a few bills to send me cash through MoneyGram. I couldn't have money come through my bank account because it would eaten from all the fees I had accrued. I even cancelled the get-together that Friday, though we were able to go in the end. Happy birthday to me, F Uber Eats.
This same thing happened to my poor mom last year. She had hundreds of Uber Eats transactions over a course of 2 months. They went unnoticed because she is in her late 60s and isn't too computer savvy, so she wouldn't check her account frequently. Anyways, my mom had to skip out of a few bills BC she's already poor to begin with. She cried when she found out that these people had taken around $2,000 of her hard-earned money and asked, "Why would someone do this to anyone?" Luckily, all the money was returned to her account by her bank, but it took a few months.
What a nightmare. I'm so sorry. If I lived in your city I would bring you a curry. And I'd eat one too.
That's so kind. Eating my chicken tikka that Friday definitely felt like a well-deserved victory.
I had a similar situation with my bank and PayPal. I moved out of the US and was trying to transfer my $700 PayPal balance to one linked to my new bank. The transaction kept declining over and over, and said to wait 5 days or whatever. Long story short, I missed the tiny print that said PayPal transactions from one account to another could only be done at a max of $500 at a time, and anything above that would instead try to take it from my linked debit account, which I had already emptied. So I just ended up doing it in 2 separate transactions. However, every time they attempted to grab the $700 from my debit card, my bank processed a $5 failed transaction fee, which ended up putting me in overdraft and charging me daily for it. By the time I found out, I think I was at like minus $245. While living in a country where my monthly salary was about $400. I contacted my bank, and their response was, "We understand these are hard times, and we can split the payment into 12 monthly payments and we will void the first one as a courtesy." And my reply was, "Nope, not paying a cent. That's a made-up debt I never used. Literally just a number entered into your computer. As far as I'm concerned, I owe you nothing." I never contacted them again, logged into my account, or acknowledged any of their emails. I can only imagine how high that debt got. My mum living in Texas got calls at home. She just said I didn't live there anymore and was sent overseas. This was in the mid-2000s, so they probably assumed I was in Iraq and likely died or something. It's been 15 years and the bank was bought out by Chase. So I assume my account is cleared now.
I love my backpack. It's nothing fancy, just a bog-standard Element rucksack, but I picked it out and it's like the only fashion brand article one own. I remember the kids in my middle school flipping out over Element gear back in their day, so it brings back fond memories. Anyway, a couple of years ago I was backpacking, road tripping across Canada. We stopped at Hope, BC for a bite to eat before continuing on to Kelowna, where we had booked accommodation for a couple of nights. I don't quite remember how, but when we arrived around 9 p.m. and unpacked the car, I couldn't find my backpack, bearing in mind this had everything in it: passport, house keys, iPad, Canadian currency, my favorite sweatshirt, phone charger. I figured the worst, that we had forgotten to lock the car while in the cafe, diner, and someone had yoinked it, because I couldn't remember bringing it with me into the shop. I did not get a lot of sleep that night. The next day I called the diner, just in case I had forgotten it inside. The nicest girl answered the phone and said that yes, there was a backpack there. I asked could she send it out to Kelowna and just take whatever it cost out of the cash envelope in the bag. She agreed immediately to send it out that evening, and I hung up, relieved. Unfortunately, being a weekend, it didn't arrive before we were due to leave the area on a 7-day camping trip through Alberta down the Icefields Parkway. So I asked the Airbnb owner if they could send my backpack onto our next stop in Calgary, to a UPS drop-off point or whatever, and again just help themselves to some cash. She agreed, and I left on a week-long trip with no signal, camping in the Rockies. It was a great week. I almost forgot that I was missing just about everything I would have needed to get home to Europe. I remember finally understanding what Bilbo says in The Lord of the Rings. I want to see mountains again, Gandalf, mountains, and then find somewhere where I can rest. I still wish I could go back there and do it all over. Leaving Banff though, I came back down to earth with a bump. We got to Calgary for On Canada Day, so everything was closed, which meant another night of worrying, but the next day I was first in line at the UPS store to pick up my parcel. It was such a relief seeing the familiar shade of burgundy when I opened it up, and everything was there, minus about $40 in shipping costs. Whenever I look at my bag, I remember how nice people can be when you just ask for help. They went out of their way to help an idiot stranger get his bag back, and I remember all the more vividly that wonderful trip through an amazing country.
I really thought the ending of the story was going to be, and it wasn't my backpack, but I just had it shipped twice across the country, and a bunch of cash taken from it, so I figured might as well keep it.
Your backpack took an unexpected journey.
I live about 4 hours from Jasper and Banff and I never go, but your post made me want to go on an adventure. I'm so glad Canada was a positive experience for you, beating heart.
One late night coming home from an evening out, my husband, a friend of ours, and myself rounded the corner to the stairs that lead to our apartment, when we saw it. Sitting about halfway up on the stairs was an opossum, eating a sandwich. He was sitting on the stairs just like people do, on his butt, with his little feet sticking out, and in his hands was an honest-to-God Subway 6-inch, still in the paper but slightly unwrapped, just like people eat it. It was like he was a tiny person in an opossum suit. There was just something so human-like about everything he was doing. We stood there for what felt like ages watching this opossum eating, and trying to figure out what to do. No way were we going to risk walking past him. We finally decided to take the long way around back to the second set of stairs, but as long as I live I'll never forget that opossum. It was such a truly surreal moment. Era, oh my goodness, thank you for the rewards you guys. Also for everyone asking about photos. This was around 2003, so cameras weren't in everyone's pocket at that time. Trust me, if that happened today I'd be sharing video of the funky little man and his sandwich.
I probably would have stayed there to stare at him simply because I'd want to see an opossum eat a whole sub.
I really wonder where he found a full Subway sandwich. I honestly can't think of any nearby Subway places near my apartment. He looked like he was just chilling on his lunch break.
Thank you for sharing. I love opossums and this made my day. This winter they've been sneaking in our barn and eating our farm cat's food out of their dish. I just let them, they're getting really friendly. I'm so tempted to pet one. Once the weather warms up here, I'm sure they'll go back into hiding, but for now I'm enjoying their presence. Edit. All this opossum love is making me so happy. They get so much hate when they're really such cool little creatures. I'm always sending pictures of Ophelia and Picasso to my friends and family, and they just think they're gross. Opossum tax. https://imager.com/gallery/46dupu.
They're super handy to have in rural areas too, since they eat so many ticks.
My entire family and I once saw a raccoon sitting the same way, drinking from a Coca-Cola bottle.
So about 5 years ago I'm walking with a guy the first used to hang out with. We are crossing the street in the crosswalk and he says, even if we get hit it's not our fault, and we immediately get hit by a large truck. I fly through the air, which is actually liberating for someone with a fear of heights, kept my eyes closed though. I hit the ground about 3 feet from hitting a large stone pillar that would have killed me. I stand up, check on my guy, walk to the guys who hit me and say dead serious, is your truck okay? I walked away, no injuries. The guy the first hung out with had a cracked pelvic bone but turned out to be a sex offender later, so. You know, love telling that story though.
That ending though.
When I was about 15 I went to the cinema with my older brother and we got some pick and mix sweets. When we were paying I said to him, I guarantee that weighs 375 grams. I had absolutely no idea what 375 grams felt like to hold, but for some reason I said it. The guy puts it on the scales and boom. 375 grams. Life has never been that good since. That was 18 years ago. My father has gotten into a fistfight with a raccoon, a buck, a turkey, and goat all on separate occasions, and at this point I'm scared of the thought of him going somewhere with more dangerous animals like Alaska or Australia. Edit. Since people asking and my phone finally decided I'm allowed to make paragraphs. A turkey bit my sibling when he was 5, and my dad somehow got it in his, admittedly drunken, mind that he needed to defend my brother's honor via fight in the turkey. The raccoon had repeatedly gotten into the chicken coop, so my dad moved the chickens in the garage and staked out the coop for the bastard. Good news. He found the raccoon and had a rifle handy. Bad news. The raccoon had rabies, and it turns out it's pretty hard to aim a rifle in a small, enclosed space while trying to dodge a raccoon trying to launch itself to your leg. IDK where he shot it, but it wasn't going down very easily and he had to resort to punching off his hip. The goat was our senior, brain-damaged goat named Ozzy. If you want to know what he looked like, imagine if all the 80s shagged carpeting had a baby with a goat. I mention the brain damage because no goat with a quarter of a functioning brain cell would from peaceful to bat poo in 10 seconds and try to ram then stomp my dad quite like Ozzy did. Or get intimate with a tire swing, but that's a story for another time. They both made it out okay, though my dad had multiple hoof-shaped bruises, and Ozzy had to wear the pool noodles of shame on his horns among other precautions. I know we probably should have gotten rid of Ozzy at that point. He was in his twilight years as it was, and we didn't want him spending it getting shipped around or slaughtered.
Working his way up the weight classes. I've got $10 on your dad.
Not a fistfight kind of guy, but me and 2 different motorcycles have had run-ins with 2 birds, a bat, a rabbit, and a deer. The second bird story is worthy of a post in this thread.
Apologies for bad English. It was in the 3rd grade and teacher said, first 5 students that will give me classwork will get 5, are in American schools. 4 students gave their notebooks and I was with my completed work going to teacher and I saw a girl ahead of me with her work and then I throw my work to teacher's table. Teacher accepted my work and the girl was sad.
Ahaha, I really liked this one.
Back in high school 2010-2011, my buddies and I would get together on weekends and watch and laugh at pooty movies. One day my buddy brought a movie he rented from a Redbox. It was by far the worst movie we have seen. It was called Hellraisers or Hellrisers. Not to be confused with the popular body horror classic. This was an absolute piece of poo. It was about a monk, a Knight of Templar, and a ninja fighting vampire-like demons in the desert. We all remember this movie. We remember plot points from it. But in the years since then we have never been able to find proof of that movie's existence. We have all searched long and hard to find it but have always come up fruitless. It's like my friend group personal Bigfoot sighting.
The movie is called Hellbinders and came out in 2009.
Oh, my effing god. That's it. That has to be it. Holy poo. I effing crying right now. OMG, thank you. You solved a freakin' 10-year mystery for me. Oh lord, do you know how long I have waited for this day?
This happened to me when I was 11. I was doing the dishes, there was a heavy pestle and mortar that I rinsed and placed on cabinet. It moved by itself from one end to another, horizontally, a good 4 feet at least. It was such a supernatural sight that I almost collapsed with shock. My mouth went dry. In those few seconds I was processing it as well as planning on how to tell everyone I actually saw something of a ghost, demon doing. In a few seconds when I got my bearings, I saw it was water, not ghost, that caused the mortar to move so freely on the slab like someone invisible moved it. I was actually disappointed.
My grandparents have lived out in the country since they married 60 years ago and they built the house they still live in today. At some point the neighbor's house burned down and they didn't rebuild and sold the land. Eventually my grandparents came to own like 1/8 of the land. Nobody ever did anything with the land, so over decades it turned into mature trees and grasses, fruit trees, berry bushes, etc. My grandpa expanded their property line some in 2 directions just to have some extra grass, and he also maintained a walking trail on the land. Everything was so green and so refreshing compared to the drab colors of flat farmland for miles around. I basically grew up at my grandparents' house. I picked berries with my dad and made jams and pies and my cousins, and I played in this abandoned barn and storage silo from the original house that used to stand there. The land was sold 1 to 2 years ago because all owners are aging. I recently visited and the new owners have completely raised the land. No more grass and no more trees. It's completely flat now. They're also trying to rezone the land from residential farmland to industrial so they can build a factory. In their right, they're trying to regain that extra land my grandpa had claimed, which runs right down the center of mature pine trees my grandpa planted 30 years ago as a windblock as well as their garden. It's depressing because 1, I've only ever known that land as green and flourishing, and 2, my grandparents have enjoyed 60 years of peace and quiet, and if all goes as planned they'll be spending the rest of their days looking at a factory next door and a road running immediately behind their house to get to the factory. There goes the peace and quiet.
Sad face.
It was the day after my birthday after a breakup 2 months prior. I had been with my ex for 8 years, we were high school sweethearts, and I considered his family to be mine. Our relationship didn't end well, and we had stopped talking due to some disrespectful behavior I had received post-breakup. So, on my birthday that year, no one from his family wished me happy birthday. I was expecting as much, but at the same time was pretty hurt about it. The breakup and its aftermath left me in a pretty vulnerable place. The day after my birthday, I was studying at a coffee shop when my mom called. I was venting about being hurt that my ex and his family didn't wish me happy birthday. About a half hour later, a staff member at the coffee shop brought me a piece of cake. The staff member, as she was handing me the cake, said an anonymous person in the coffee shop wished me a happy birthday. I started bawling in the middle of the coffee shop in disbelief that someone could be so nice. I asked around and asked the staff with no indication of who got me this slice of cake. So I'll never know. Regardless, it was the nicest thing a stranger has ever done for me, and I'll always remember that kind sentiment for the rest of my life.
A few weeks back, I was driving a car and there was a motorcycle some 20 feet in front of me. On it were a couple and their son. When we were taking a 90 degrees turn, it lost control and they fell, and I kid you not, as soon as I realized they were falling, my perception went into some kind of slow motion, kinda like in the Matrix bullet scene. In the split second that the bike lost control and they fell, I estimated the distance between us, how fast I was going, how much I needed to brake to stop hitting them, should I and could I swerve right just to be sure I don't hit them, and checked if there were any vehicles overtaking me. There was another bike, all the while the lady was falling down in some kind of slowed down video. As soon as she hit the road and I braked hard, everything went back to normal and my tire stopped a few inches from her head. There was another split second where everything went faster than normal, but that was small. Everyone was safe.
A friend of mine got T-boned from the passenger side so hard the door's remains were just centimeters away from her. She said that time slowed down so much she could see the metal bending. Now she refuses to drive with anyone else in the car.
Crazy what mind is capable of doing in extreme circumstances.
I'm pretty sure adrenaline can mess with your perception of time and increase your reaction speed, most likely what was happening. I'm very glad everyone was okay.
I too think that's what might have happened. Luckily the road was smooth and they just got a few scratches. The kid was pretty shaken though, poor thing. When I was a kid in Indonesia, I just learned how to ride a bike. There's this roadside food stall which located at the top of a sewer. The food stall owner made a makeshift platform from wooden planks. I remember vividly the food stall was selling some kind of Indonesian chicken soup, and people were eating while sitting atop of the platform. I hit the food cart with my bike, the food cart fell on the platform, and sending 10 plus people to the sewer. Fortunately, nobody got hurt. But man, I was so afraid. I really want to cry but I was too afraid to do that. I just stood there until someone went to my house, and I remember my grandfather came and paid for all the damage. He even gave some money to those who fell to the sewer and asked everyone there not to tell my father about it. Until now, my father had no idea about that incident.
My fiancée has bad luck with online phone services. It's actually quite amazing. Her track record of getting nowhere when having to call about a payment or something is amazing. Before we lived together I kind of thought she must be mean or condensing to the people on the other end of the phone. But nope, she is nice and pleasant. But still gets nowhere or gets someone unhelpful. This bad luck also extends to Amazon. The amount of her packages they manage to lose is astounding. Where I order just as much and have only had one lost package in the amount of time she has lost 5. And that package that got lost was a gift for her. Lol.
Dude, Amazon tried closing my account because of all the packages they lost. I had to spend an hour and change on the phone with customer service asking how it's my fault their delivery people lost things.
Seriously? That's BS, man. IDK why it happens. I thought it would be the delivery drivers where it gets lost, but like I said, they rarely lose my packages but constantly lose hers. We have separate accounts but live at the same address. So I think it's just her account or something.
One night around 1 a.m. I was driving home after just breaking up with my girlfriend, so naturally I was feeling a lot of emotions and wasn't thinking straight. As I got off the motorway, freeway for the Americans, a large truck in front of me suddenly swerved for no apparent reason and I slammed on my brakes. As I continued, I noticed an animal in the road jumping frantically, and upon closer inspection, I noticed it was a fox with a crisp packet fully over its head and it couldn't see anything. Naturally it was pretty distressed. Knowing it had just escaped certain death from the truck, but would almost definitely be run over by another car, I put my hazards on and jumped out my car, still on the slip road. I crept up close to the fox, but he sensed me and darted away. I ended up chasing him for 5 to 10 minutes around a major roundabout, all the time both of us dodging fast-moving cars. Eventually, he seemed to give up the chase and let me creep towards him. I held the end of the crisp packet and he yanked his face away, before giving me what looked like a grateful eye nod and darting off into the night, leaving me standing there full of adrenaline, with my car now holding up at least 10 other people on the slip road and the door wide open.
Once during a port call in Naples, me and a bunch of buddies were walking around lost looking for a place to eat. A nice older dude in broken English asked us if we needed directions. We told him we were some lost Americans looking for decent local place for dinner. He told us to follow him and he took us to a nice small restaurant on a side street. Food was awesome. He just sat in a corner sipping an espresso, and when we were done the waitress said he paid for the bill. We left her a wad of lira as it was our last day in port, went to thank him. I always carry Zippos with the command with me when in port, so I gave him a USS Enterprise Zippo. He was very appreciative in return. Nicest man I have ever met in Italy.
During a hike at Yellowstone, I took a massive poo a few meters away from a bison.
I like how there are whole paragraphs of stories, and then this. Edit, although this reply was not at all wholesome, thanks for the wholesome award. I guess that is just how Reddit is.
When I was like 4 or 5, this was like a decade ago, I was at a neighbor's party across the street. You know those parties, the parents hang out and put the kids in the basement, backyard or somewhere else, and none of you know each other. Anyway, we're in the basement and some of the older kids start playing darts. Me being a little kid, I want to try because I think it's cool and I don't know what it is. Anyway, I'm throwing darts and suddenly hit the center of the dartboard. The dart fell after I hit it. I wasn't strong enough to make it stay. Then everyone starts to cheer and go like, "Oh my god." Yeah, and stuff like that. Me being young, I know it's good because I get 2 high fives from 2 of the older boys and people are saying I did a great job. Remember, I don't know what darts is, I'm 4 or 5, and I felt awesome. As you can probably imagine, the cheering made a racket and could be heard upstairs. My father soon came down to see what was up and everyone was going, me, hit it right here, pointing to the center of the dartboard, and things like that. I don't remember much of what happened after my dad showed up, whether he was proud of his son or what. But I was proud, and I still think about that story, 10 or 11 years later. And it still makes me smile. Edit. Wow, thanks for so many upvotes.
Back in the early 90s, I was stationed at Nellis AFB in Las Vegas. I have ridden a motorcycle my entire life, and while I was stationed there, this was no exception. One of my buddies that I used to ride with was with me this one day when this happened. Trigger warning. It has a very unhappy ending for a bird and most likely therapy for a girl I had known only a few hours. It also involves some very unsafe motorcycle driving that should never be attempted by anyone. Period. I mean it. Don't drive that fast. My friend Mike's girlfriend wanted to introduce me to her friend who liked motorcycles, and earlier in the day we met at his place, and once it started to get later in the evening and cooler, we decided that the Apex Dry Lake would be a great place to go. Being bulletproof and 22 years old, we like to ride fast. Not necessarily in town, but out on the straights, we'd really twist the throttle. I've since calmed down since then, but back then you couldn't have told us about the dangers. We were 22, horny, had girls, and up to nothing but shenanigans, anyway. The full face helmet and leather riding jacket added to that feeling of invincibility. I barely knew Christy, only by about 6 hours, and I quickly found out that she wasn't the most experienced passenger. Bikers know what I mean. She was stiff on the back, not fluid, held too tight or not at all, scared of making turns, almost terrified. When we got out to that little 2-lane stretch of road that goes nowhere, it was still light out. The road is technically Las Vegas Boulevard North, I think, and I mean way north, and it became obsolete when I-15 was put in. When we turned up that way, we rocked the throttle, and I mean rocked it. The road was still in good condition while not really maintained, and there was never, arguably, any traffic coming the other way since the road really went to, well, nowhere. After my bike limited out, I was riding 105 miles per hour and this bird crosses the road in front of me. I barely make it out. It was a white L. shape that you see when you're going that fast. I don't even have time to think about it when a second bird comes out and I simply bring my chin down lower and I feel a very meaty thump on the top of my helmet. What ensued seemed like pure chaos. I could hear my passengers' screams over the noise of the wind, and fellow cyclists know this is not possible when going that fast. I had already released the throttle, waiting to reach a speed where I could begin downshifting when my passenger decides to try to get off the motorcycle. I reach back and grab whatever article of clothing I can with my left hand, holding her down, still screaming, yelling at her to sit down, and through the grace of whatever angels were present that day, I managed to get the bike under control and stopped. Mike pulls up next to me laughing uncontrollably. His girl is wide-eyed with terror, mine is still screaming, I'm screaming get off the bike, which she does, and promptly falls on her ass. I put the kick down, and then I see it. Her face shield, always a full face helmet, by the way, I've never ridden with anything else, was covered in blood and guts. This bird had hit the top of my head and literally, not metaphorically, exploded right into her face. I don't mean exploded in a Tom and Jerry kind of way, I mean more like an M80 in a goose down pillow filled with chicken guts and gravy kind of way. And it plastered her entire face shield. In fact, that's kind of how Mike explained it. He said suddenly there was this big puff of feathers like a pillow had exploded as he flew by it. I don't know how I managed to get her back on the bike to get her back home, but I never heard from her again. Mike and I fell out of touch long ago, and he and his girl broke up. But, I know it's not your real name, but Christy, I'm sorry, and I hope you're doing well. Sorry about that mental scar.
This is a dumb one, but while working in Rite Aid, a customer was paying about half of their purchase in quarters. The total was less than $5 and she gave me two $1s and some quarters which combined equals to less than what she owed. I told her that she was short and she told me, no, I gave you $5. I thought that maybe I mistook a $half coin as a quarter, so I recounted and there was no difference. I told her that she's short and she bitches to me how she gave more than enough and that I need to give her change. I then told her I had X amount of quarters in my right hand and Y amount in my left. She finally understands and gives me enough coins so that I can continue the transaction. Before she gave me more coins, she complains that it's my fault and that I acted like I've never seen quarters before. Like WTF. I counted in front of her twice and told her that she was short each time. She's throwing a hissy fit that an employee is making sure that the customer gave the right amount of money.
I was a cashier at Costco. Someone got mad at me because he gave me $20 more than needed and I gave him back to him.
People these days always trying to make me pay the right amount. Who raised people to count my money, imbeciles? I was a server at this beach restaurant per bar for a few years, and it's always busy during winter because that's when snowbirds fly down to Florida. On one really busy night, and way too crowded, management tried to work in as much seating as possible. I'm trying to make my way to a 15 top with their drinks. I tell this woman next to me, excuse me, I have a lot of drinks and I need to get over there please, excuse me, about 5x. She keeps talking and ignores me. I shimmy my way between her chair and the pillar behind her. I almost made it through, until she talked with her hands a bit too expressively and pulled the tray of drinks down on top of her, extremely embarrassing. Edit, sounds ridiculous, but I'm 5'1". I'm pretty low to the ground lol. As you can imagine, it's a horrific scene, a couple of rich and snooty folks wearing full suits and formal dresses to a causal beach bar, you can be barefoot in there. Lol, are screaming and threatening to call the cops on me and sue. They also started hurling racist insults to our Puerto Rican busser. One example, my busser was speaking perfect English to them trying to de-escalate the situation, and the husband yells, "Do you even understand me? Manager. English. Manager." I feel like the universe used me for their karma that night. Racists deserve to get beer and water poured on them all effing day. Honored to serve. This one is a bit odd, and kinda gross. This is how I learned a new medical term, scarred my family, and started a long health journey. So while I was in college I went a week without eating, or going to the bathroom. My schedule, overload of credits and 2 jobs, I honest to God didn't notice. I was stopped in my tracks by a phone call from my dad. With a shaky voice he said, "Great-grandma, my last name, passed away this morning. She was dropped while being loaded into the ambulance and her heart stopped. She's gone. My great-grandmother was an amazing person. I should have told the story about her and the spirits, maybe another time. She was fascinating and had a mind like a steel trap. Miss her. So that weekend I go home for the funeral. At the wake my mum asks when the last time I ate was. I didn't remember. She made me eat a sandwich. It felt like torture and I didn't know why. A short while later I began sweating profusely and then got very weak. I said I didn't feel well and my brother took me to my parents' house. I immediately fell asleep in my bed. At about 2 a.m., I shoot straight up in bed. We all know that feeling, I needed to throw up 30 seconds ago and have 3 seconds to make a 25-foot dash to the bathroom. I couldn't hold it back. As I entered the smallish basement bathroom, my 2 siblings' bedrooms are right next to bathroom, I threw up hard into my mouth, but something was wrong. I tasted iron, and some liquid went between my fingers. Yes, this is gross, but there's a point. My eyes still blurry from just waking up, I begin vomiting, the most painful vomiting imaginable. I'm practically screaming. My eyes start to focus on my hand, which is trying desperately to grasp the edge of the toilet. Is that blood? I begin to look around and there is blood everywhere. My sister, hearing this, had run to get my parents without looking into the bathroom. When my mum opened the door, she immediately saw blood all over the white linoleum floor leading to me. Me slumped over with my head partially into the toilet, no longer moving. Blood all over the toilet and spattered on the wall. I suddenly started gasping and coughing. I had blacked out. I began throwing up again and turned to my mum, and she was horrified. I was whiter than printer paper and had blood all over me, running out of my nose and mouth. Help me, please, I gasped weakly, pleading, am I going to die? Then I blacked put again. I woke up to my mum and sister sobbing as my dad was cleaning me up with a blood-soaked white towel. The towel was dripping red. My eyes were blurry and I said, hospital. We get to the urine and was finished with throwing up. I couldn't walk, I was so weak. The doctor was beyond perplexed. They did scans, tests, but they couldn't get any blood from me for hours. They'd hit a vein but couldn't get enough. It sucked. The doctor finally said, mesenteric lymphadenitis. Your lymphodes did their job in gathering all the bad stuff, but stopped doing their job in discharging it. As for the vomiting blood, honestly I'm at a loss. Had 4 people not witnessed it, and brought a cell phone picture, I wouldn't have believed it. But your tests are indicative of a lot of blood loss. Never did find out why the blood, although years later in the again, I did have a slow bleed in my intestinal area. Also unexplained. On a more sad note, I missed the funeral.
This is about the time I peed all over myself while my husband had me pinned in a very compromising position. So, we were wrestling on the bed. He pins me so that I'm basically folded in half on my back, with my ass up in the air and my knees are by my ears. I start laughing. Then I start farting because I'm laughing. Then I start laughing even harder because I farted. I'm still pinned down, not breathing from laughing so hard, my chest is burning. I need to stop laughing and take a breath, and right when I thought I was able to take a breath, my dog violates me by shoving his nose right where I farted from and holds it there. I was wearing leggings. The audacity of this action made me laugh even harder and I pissed all over myself.
Going through our full shrimp is hard. This is hilarious. That's where this story belongs.
Yes. Lol, it was exactly like the shrimp pose, lol.
The time I, as a 25-year-old, called the police to check for boogeymen under my bed and they found all my bondage stuff. It was a Friday night. I was cleaning the upstairs bathroom of the house. Yes, on a Friday night, I like to start the weekend clean. Don't judge me. And the dog, was chilling out on the landing to the stairs right outside the bathroom. To understand this story, you must know about dog, worst guard dog ever. To illustrate, one time I was at the store and had left the house's attic fan running, but it started to rain. I asked a neighbor who had the key to run over and turn the attic fan off so that the attic didn't get soaked. Once the neighbor entered the front door, instead of protect the house, dog ran into the basement in fear, passing our neighbor on the stairs on his way down. Back to Friday night. I'm cleaning, and suddenly I hear dog start to growl and bark. Another thing about dog, he almost never barked, and when he did, it was always more of a cry because he was upset about something. This was a bark bark, growl growl. I turn off the bathroom fan and go stand next to him to try to figure this out. I hear the door to the garage closing. I go down to investigate. I know, I was auditioning for a part in a serial killer movie, and don't see anything super amiss, except I left the patio door unlocked. Dog had followed me downstairs, and keeps doing bark bark, growl growl, so I grab my keys and phone and take him out to my car, which is parked on the street. Once inside the car, I called the non-emergency police number to have them maybe come by. Or decide if they should. Well, the non-emergency person told me to call 911. Which resulted in the immediate response of suburb's finest, ready to rock. Of course, they found nothing. They thought probably the wind had made the door I heard close, or rattle in its frame. I say they found nothing, but at the time, I had a full set of bondage straps and other toys set up under the bed that could be pulled out at a moment's notice. As they were leaving, the one cop said over his shoulder, "We even checked under the bed. You're safe. I'm not so sure about your dates, though." Facepalm.
There was a little magical place me and all my classmates would go. Behind all the houses on a certain street, there was a grassy area concealed by trees that was high on two sides but low in the middle, so it formed a river when it rained. Me and my brother and all my friends would go there and walk up and down this little area. It went for a couple blocks. When it rained, we raced paper boats in the river. It was the only place our parents couldn't find us if they looked, so we all pretended it was our own little kingdom which belonged to us. Some days it was a fairy tale forest and we would play knights and princesses. Some days it was a nerd gun war zone. Some days it was a functioning city with businesses and busy streets. Almost everyone I knew at school hung out there. At night, when all the little kids went home, teenagers went there to smoke and have sex. During the summer the river was filled with mosquito larvae and there were ticks in the grass, but it was all ours. We had little wars that took place there. There were a fair share of interesting things that happened there. Once, there was a beehive on one far end of it, so we all avoided it and played on the opposite end. One kid decided to be brave and whack it with a baseball bat. He went to the hospital. This happened when we were at school. There was a rumor spread by some kid that pirates' treasure was buried there, so a few of us dug around looking for it. One time we watched a cat give birth there. Half the babies didn't survive because some idiot decided to use them like golf balls. Another rumor was spread that an adult teacher regularly held orgies with teen girls in his class there, but it probably wasn't true. It was everything to us, until I moved away. I kept in contact with some people from there, and one told me it was later cleared to build something. I cried when I heard that. That little place meant everything to me.
This story took a dark turn upon imagining a kid clubbing kittens to death pretending they were golf balls.
I had the exact same thing growing up, down to the beehive. Mine were wasps, and a kid got stung on the eyeball. We called it Fairyland, which was, interestingly, suggested by a boy. It didn't have a river, but it did have a cliff, a cave, several thickets so dense they made roofs, and several spruce trees that were like little forest houses inside their canopies, complete with spruce furniture. One morning, my little sister and I, 5 and 7, went back there, and were attacked by a pit bull that the owners of the area had put back there to ward off the night teens. I had my trusty pointed stick, as always, and was able to hold it off by keeping the stick pointed at its eyes while turning in a circle, with my sister clutching my back, but just before adults saved us it dashed around and bit my sister on the butt. She was wearing a huge purple winter coat, so she just had a bruise. To this day I still dream that my sister is in danger and I have to save her, and for a long time I hated dogs. Kids fell off the cliff 2 meters, started fires in the cave about 0.5 meters deep, impaled each other with sticks and molested each other, all within earshot of home. In the front yard of the property, it was a nursing home. There was a tremendous hill that ended in granite wall that was a half-meter high on the hillside and just over a full meter at the street. We would build jumps all up and down the 0.45 grade hill, and one going over the wall. So many of us landed in the middle of the street on the other side. Some of us just hit the wall, the careless ones hit face first. From the top of the hill, you could access the roof of a 3-story building. We would go to the end of the dormers on the front side and look over the edge at the street far below, until someone eventually spotted us and yelled. I played endless games of make-believe with the friend who would eventually introduce me to Dungeons & Dragons. He always wanted me to be Smurfette, but I was always Medusa instead. I once discovered my best friend at the time attempting a sexual encounter with a slightly older boy from the neighborhood. She cheerfully invited me to join, but being 8 and having no clue what was going on, and not wanting to pull my pants down, I politely declined. Just then, a woman walking her dog blundered through the scene and my friend had to run away while pulling up her underwear. I remember standing there dumbly while the woman freaked out and screamed for us to go get our parents. And get in real trouble? Unlikely, lady. The nursing home was sold, torn down, and now the area is all condos. This used to be my playground.
One night on my way home after work on an especially freezing night, I stopped for gas and was approached by a homeless man called himself Miami. I typically hand over spare money to homeless people, and try to make a little small talk even if I don't have cash on me. I think it's important to treat people like people. I won't go into too much detail, but after forking over a few dollars I ended up driving this fellow all around town. He smoked crack in my car, he tried to entice me with promises of women in some cheap hotel, he asked me to give some other homeless person a ride, and on it went until like 4 or 5 a.m., when he went into a hotel room. I took his plastic bags out of my car and neatly put them to the side, and left before he came back out. In my defense, he was in there for over half an hour before I left. The entire encounter was pretty unpleasant from beginning to end, but for some reason I remember it fondly. I know he thinks he was taking advantage of me, and I shudder when I imagine the girls he wanted me to meet. But it was cold, he had absolutely nothing, and I helped alleviate that at least for one night. I don't talk about it because I don't want people to think I'm trying to brag or anything like that, but it did happen, and I often catch myself wondering how Miami the crack-smoking homeless man is faring out on these streets. After delivering my firstborn, one of the nurses was explaining the various birthmarks and how most will fade. The red mark on her nose is more of an abrasion, from being pushed through your birth canal. We call it rug burn, less than laughs greater than. I laugh too, and respond, well, that's not possible, I just had a Brazilian wax. Crickets. Nobody laughed. Not the doctor, or the resident, or the 3 nurses, or my husband. Probably the greatest off-the-cuff joke I will ever make, and nothing.
Maybe no one will read it, but it's been almost a month that I am not as depressed or suicidal anymore. Like I can finally focus like I used to, and there is no mental fog anymore. I can go about my day without intrusive thoughts. I can maintain my daily routine, exercise, eat healthy, I can finally sleep properly. But I am scared it will all go away, that I will lose this clarity and things will return to what they were. Edit. Guys, I have no words for the overwhelming response to my post. Reading through all of your messages has given me hope, confidence, strength, momentum and assurance. Thank you for taking the time out of your lives for me. You made a grown man cry from a cocktail of feelings he hasn't felt for 4 years. I hope I can pay it forward. Thank you all. 2. Talking online has helped me a lot, and if anybody wants to talk, please feel free to message me anytime. 3. Next time I am feeling down, this is the comment thread I am visiting.
I have posted this before. And #X200B. About 7 years ago I was in a city a few hours away from my home with a group of friends for a concert. We were staying at a mid-range hotel, our rooms all lined up next to each other. A bunch of middle-class white kids in our mid-20s with very few responsibilities, good jobs, plenty of time on our hands, out free in a world that had, for the most part, treated us pretty well. When we checked in and rode the elevator up to our room in a group, we were chattering and laughing. Our basic state of being was a continual banter, and we thought we were hilarious. We got off of the elevator and found our rooms, and we hardly noticed when someone cracked a door on the other side of the hallway to look out at us. An hour later, we were back in the hall. We'd showered the road off of us and gotten dressed, discussing dinner plans. The door across the hall opened again. A black man in his 50s? 60s? Stepped out. His clothes were clean but worn. His hands shook a little. When he spoke, he had a slight slur in his voice. He introduced himself as Matthew. I shook his hand and gave him my name. I'll admit, we were a bit aloof. This man was intruding himself on our evening. His presence changed the tone of the entire moment. It was impossible to keep on cracking the jokes, making the snappy replies, when he was there. He asked what our plans were, and we answered simply. We told him about the concert that night. He said maybe he'd come to it, too, and we told him, truthfully, that it had sold out hours after the tickets went on sale months ago. He went back into his room and shut the door, and we stood there awkwardly before we started down the hallway for the elevator. We hadn't gotten more than a few feet before the door opened again and he was looking at us, offering most of a grocery store rotisserie chicken. "Just in case you're hungry." "No thanks, we're heading to dinner," I said. He was silent a moment. "You all must be thinking, what's this crazy N-words problem? Why won't he leave us alone?" I stopped. I had been turning back away. "I'd never think that. I don't, that's not a word I use." "Sure, you don't know me. Who am I? You don't know. You got your own things going on." I didn't speak. It was true. I didn't know him. My friends were silent behind me. "I've been in this hotel 3 months now. Ain't nobody will give me the time of day." The plastic packaging of the chicken was dripping condensation on the lurid carpet of the hallway. I took a step towards him. My, at the time, girlfriend did too. He said, "Been here 3 months. Government pays my stay and all, but it's lonely." Look, he disappeared into his room and came back, a letter-folded piece of paper in his hand. I took it. It was a declaration of permanent and total disability for Corporal Matthew Adams, with a disability benefit of $3,000 per month. He was a vet, Vietnam. I looked into his room. It was a little disheveled, with drawers open and groceries sticking out of them. Boxes of crackers, cookies. Food that didn't need preparation for a long hotel stay. I could feel the discomfort of my friends behind me. They were still and soundless. "You guys go ahead," I said. "I'll catch up." "I'll stay, too," said my girlfriend. Her hand found mine. I'm not sure how long we spent in his room talking. He was in the hotel while they arranged a new place for him. He got moved around a lot, he said. It had been 3 months. He had everything he needed, he was just lonely. "What about veterans groups?" I asked. Yeah, all of them. I'm in all of them. Doesn't mean much. Doesn't make you less alone." My girlfriend was silently crying. Matthew started to cry, too. "They took me and made me a stone killer and left me all alone. All alone in a hotel room with nobody." I gave him a long hug. He shook in my arms. He was very thin. I could feel his tears through the fabric of my shirt. After a long time he let go of me. "Thank you." He took a deep breath. "Thank you." He sat on the bed. He looked tired. "We need to get going, but I want to stay in touch," I said. I looked at my girlfriend. She nodded emphatically. "Let me write down my number and our address. You don't need me bothering you. Please. If you need to talk you can call." He let me write them down for him. I wonder if he still has them. In the elevator down I hugged my girlfriend and she cried. I did too. I thought of Matthew in his room above us, laying in bed. In my mind his eyes were open and he was staring at the ceiling. In the lobby our friends had waited for us. They looked a little relieved to see us. I think about him a lot. His name wasn't Matthew Adams, of course. I didn't want to use his real name. I'll never forget it. He's never called. I still have the same number. Occasionally I try to find him, but I really don't know where to start. I don't blame my friends for opting out of that situation. They simply weren't equipped for it. Neither was I suppose. The girlfriend is now my wife. This will be pretty far down this thread, so I guess I don't know if anyone will find it. If you do, consider donating to a veterans group or volunteering somewhere. He never tried to reach out to me. I wish he would.
As a vet, I just wanted to say thank you for taking some time to make him feel a little less alone that night. I was lucky enough to have a good support system which allowed me to land on my feet when I got out, but I know some who didn't. Whether or not you ever hear from him, you and your wife definitely made that night better for him.
When I was a child, my parents hired an immigrant babysitter to take care of us. She was quite nice to us. One night, I was half awake from my sleep. I was the only one conscious among my family. I noticed something at the window. A dark figure. It shocked me at first, thinking it was a ghost, but the thing was actually familiar. My babysitter climbed the window in the middle of night. As I looked at her, she told me to shush. Didn't understand anything at that time. I fell back asleep. The next day, I realized my nanny was no longer here with us. Later, I discovered that she purposely ran away despite my parents gave reasonable wages and provided needs for her, even approving her passport. Don't know the reason why she fled. I'm perplexed about how she escaped through that window from a 3-story building. I still remembered this incident until now.
Thank you for watching. We upload new videos every day, so be sure to come back for more fun. Please consider liking and subscribing if you enjoyed the video.